Hello, and welcome to this overview of Chapter 5, the American Political Landscape and Demographics. I'm Mr. Rodman here to take you through it. Please feel free to pause if I don't give you enough time on each slide. And remember, this is not a replacement for the Magleby text. It is a supplement, so I hope you'll find it helpful, but I hope you'll still read in answering your reading guide questions and working on those concept cards. All right, let's dive right in. Let's talk about political efficacy. I mentioned it in the last chapter, and if you didn't check out that overview in Chapter 4, I definitely would encourage you to do so. But efficacy is the idea to produce an effect. And I look at efficacy as this idea of understanding what's going on in the world. Okay, internal efficacy, is the belief that you can understand what's going on in the world of politics and be able to take part so that the government can respond to you. That's the external part. The internal efficacy is knowing that I know how government works, I know what part I can play in it, and I will play that part, whether that is calling my congressman, writing a letter, participating in a protest, joining a political party, joining an interest group, exercising my right to hold a sign and protest on a street corner with other protesters, or whatever it is, joining an interest group and supporting issues and getting other people to do so. All of those things are exercising your internal efficacy. And even staying home and not voting, unfortunately, although I don't encourage it, is exercising your internal efficacy. We have a lot of voters who feel that their vote doesn't matter, and that's really sad. And we hope that is not you. We hope that because you are listening to this, you're one of those motivated ones. Live the 5. You are one of those motivated ones that is out there to exercise your internal efficacy in a way. I always tell my students, whether you are running for president of your homeowners association in order to get a crosswalk in your neighborhood, or whether you're running for president of the United States, or somewhere in between, you're going to make a difference in this world. You're going to exercise your internal efficacy because you are going to make your voice heard in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's voting, whether that's all of the things I just mentioned, that's exercising your internal efficacy. Okay? So, external is the idea that based on that internal efficacy, government responds to us in terms of the type of efficacy that we produce. So if we are very apathetic voters and we don't come out and vote, then the government is not going to be very responsive to our needs because they're going to say, well, they're not going to vote anyway. So why should I worry about them if they don't even care to come out and vote or support my campaign or participate in a protest? Why should I support them in what their agenda is, what their policy agenda is? And that's the external efficacy aspect. And that's why internal is so important, because we need to make our voices heard, right? Now, notice we have a very low external political efficacy, okay? Because we don't believe that government's going to respond to our issues. But a lot of that is because we don't exercise our internal efficacy. We are not making our voice heard in telling our elected officials what we believe and why we believe it, what we're going to take action on and why. We're not telling them why we think something's important and why they need to support it, why they need to put more money towards those types of programs and not others. And they're not listening because we're not exercising that voice. And that's the part of political efficacy that I think we miss in a lot of cases. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we're teaching American government at Walter Johnson High School and in American public schools, is because we want people to exercise their internal efficacy. And it doesn't matter what your issue is, what you support. People have lots of different views and viewpoints and action they want the government to take. And the point is, you're exercising it. You're making your voice heard. You and others are making a difference. And that is the exercising of internal efficacy that we want to see. Okay, so we can see that, unfortunately, we're in a downward slope, right? Internal and external efficacy is falling, and the reason is because people think it's just overwhelming in terms of the public policy scene. Politics is too complicated. It doesn't matter what I think. They don't care about me. And so you know what happens? They don't care about you. They don't care about you because you're showing them that you don't care. And they're saying, well, what do they care if I do something or don't do something? They don't make their voice heard. They don't exercise their efficacy. So why should we as government care about their issues? And then it's a downward spiral. So that's why you need to take more action along those lines. And we can see here just with the chart, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but looking at the trust in government has fallen. Why? Because government doesn't do what we need it to. Why? Because we don't tell government what we want. And then we are surprised when they don't give it to us. And that is a lot of what we see in the data, in the results. We see elected official as selfish. Well, why? Because they're carrying out their own public policy agenda. Why are they doing that? Because they're not hearing from their constituents, and they're not hearing any other voices along those lines in terms of what public policies should be carried out. And that's why demography and demographics is so important, because politicians look at these things, but if you're not exercising that internal efficacy, you're not making your voice heard. And that really is the important piece of this chapter, is really driving that home. So notice demography is this study of population characteristics, demographics. Think of demographics like labels. You have a label on your shirt. Look at the shirt, the tag you have in your shirt, or I guess now that it's printed right on the shirt, right? They don't do the tags as much anymore. But the idea is there's a tag in there. That's demographics. That's labels, right? Now we think of labels for clothes, but there are labels for people, and there are a lot of factors that weigh into those labels, those characteristics. It could be age, could be race, could be gender, ethnicity, could be a level of education or your level of income, what part of the country you're from. All of those things can impact your demographics and how you vote based on those demographics. We have cleavages in public opinion. Now, some of these are reinforcing. A pollster can tell how you're going to vote because you have a reinforcing cleavage in public opinion. They can see that you are aligning almost perfectly with a liberal or conservative cleavage, and by reinforcing that, they can see that you're going to vote Republican or Democrat. A cross-cutting cleavage causes a lot more headaches and makes them burn through a lot more aspirin as a result. And so cross-cutting is when you're kind of sending mixed messages. You're not of the same demographic characteristics as you would normally see with someone who's going to vote a certain way, and you're kind of throwing them off the trail. And so we'll take a look at a couple of examples where this is the case too. That's what we call a cross-cutting cleavage. And what it means is it's harder for a candidate who's running for office to figure out how you're going to vote and what issues that they should be supporting and sharing with you so that they can get your vote. And that is really where that's really where we see a lot of people today in the cross-cutting cleavage category. Why? Because more of them are independent. More of them are purple. They're swinging to the left and becoming more blue, or they're swinging to the right and becoming more red, and then swinging back again. And so there's this back and forth. That's very much a cross-cutting cleavage that we see. And what it tells pollsters is that we need to focus on the issues they care about, but it's harder to figure out what those issues are. And if you're not making your voice heard and exercising your internal efficacy, as we talked about at the beginning of the chapter, it makes it even more difficult to be able to pin you down in terms of what issues I should be taking out to the campaign. I should be focusing on in my campaign ads and in my literature and in my social media to be able to get your attention. It's a lot harder to do that. But that is where campaigns spend the most money. Is in that particular area. So notice we have a reinforcing cleavage when we have a white Protestant male. You're a member of three groups right there that all tend to be conservative. And chances are that you are going to vote Republican because you are white, which tends to be more conservative. You are male, which tends to be more conservative. And you are Protestant, which tends to be more conservative. And again, we're generalizing, but all three of those factors reinforce the cleavage in public opinion that you are going to vote conservatively. And so you're probably going to vote Republican. And again, that's not a surefire win, but it's really trying to address how are they going to vote if I had to try and figure this out. Now notice the cross-cutting cleavage. We have a black Protestant female. Notice that based on race, we have one ideological viewpoint, which is diverse backgrounds tend to vote more liberally. Females also tend to vote more liberally than males, but Protestants tend to vote more conservatively. And so by being Protestant in the middle of all of that, you've got a person that I don't know how they're going to vote. She could vote Republican. She could vote Democrat. She kind of leans, being a black female, she leans more liberally. But being Protestant, that may override being black female, and so it is a cross-cutting cleavage. This is the demographic characteristics, the cross-cutting cleavages that are harder for campaigns to figure out how to target those voters and get their attention in order to get their vote. And so that's where, as I said, they spend the most money trying to reach out to those cross-cutting cleavage voters because they're the ones where elections are going to be won or they're going to be lost in terms of how you reach them. Geography is another category of cross-cutting cleavage. We see a lot of urban areas that would tend to be more liberal, right? But think of upstate New York, which tends to be much more conservative. Think of Florida, which has been a red state for a good part of, 15, 20 years, and yet Miami, which is very liberal. So you have two very different geographies that are very cross-cutting in nature. So just because you're from that state doesn't necessarily mean that because you're from Florida, you're going to be conservative. If you live in Miami, you're probably going to be more liberal. And again, it's got to be other factors that weigh into it as well. And the point here is trying to figure out those cleavages in public opinion are based on multiple cleavages. So, we're trying to look here in this last category, we're looking at 3 different characteristics. They look at a lot more characteristics than just 3 in order to be able to make those determinations. And that's the point. It's not just geography. It's based on a lot of all those other factors that we're gonna look at in more detail in this chapter. Alex de Tocqueville talked about this in Democracy in America. He came here to study our prisons and ended up writing about the democratic institution, right? And how it was succeeding because of the factors, the opportunities that we had available from opening businesses, acquiring land, making livings, not having this aristocracy passed down from generation to generation, a much more entrepreneurial spirit that was valuing hard work, that Protestant work ethic, and we see a lot of that even today in a lot of these cleavages in public opinion with some of the demographics. Now, we know, as I said, that the South, think the Sun Belt, tends to be more conservative, but we have pockets in which that's not the case. We saw Georgia in the 2020 election went Democratic, was very purple, but in 2024 was very conservative and went for President Trump. Arizona, in 2020 went for Joe Biden, and in 2024 went for Donald Trump. So the Sun Belt, the Southwest, if you will, or South and Southwest, tended to be more conservative, and a lot of this is coming from its history. You think about the people who comprise a lot of the South and the last 100 years of Southern history. Think Civil War, think Reconstruction, Jim Crow. Religion played a huge impact in that, and so while these factors are changing, there's a lot of historical cleavages in public opinion that are there, and they tend to be more conservative as a result. So again, it doesn't mean that everybody in Dallas, Texas votes conservatively. Quite the opposite. Dallas probably more liberally, but in other places in Texas, it would be more conservatively. And so the point is that we started to see a lot of different demographics and even shifts in demographics along the way. Notice whites in the South, even with the civil rights era, didn't immediately switch and become conservative. That kind of happened over time. That exchange kind of took place, and it really wasn't until the 90s that we saw that flip in the Democrat-Republican threshold. And there's a lot of data we can take a look at here, and we're not going to delve into all of them, but the idea is that you can see and Magleby focuses on this in the text, that there's a lot of changes that take place over time, and usually it's not a significant change and it's not quick. It's usually over time and it's evolutionary and it's happening, play by play, bit by bit. But we see a lot of factors in which we can, compare and we'll do that in class, taking a look at some of the election results and kind of the demographics of those elections and how that has changed over time. 2012, for instance, I just want to show three maps here. This is 2012, 2016, and 2020, and you can probably already see by me flipping through them kind of the differences. Notice in the 2012 map here, with the blue, again, more liberal, red, more conservative. And I know this isn't really fair because in a lot of cases, the red is more rural and there are fewer voters in those places than in the more dense blue areas that tend to be more urban, that there's a higher, denser population in those areas. But the idea that you can see is that we have the intensity of voting is changing. And in those urban centers, we see the blue get bluer, we see the red get redder, and we see a very polarized country that there's not a lot of changes happening per se in those particular markets that we identified as being by region or urban or rural, but more intense along those lines. So the Bible Belt, for instance, which is kind of this area you see here in purple, the religious aspect having an important role in the conservatives, as you may remember, because that tends to be, we talked about this in the last chapter, tends to be one area in which it is very important to them in terms of how government responds to the needs of the people and gets out of the way when not needed, right? The Sun Belt, more responsive, again, to Republicans and conservatives in that area. The blue, and I would even say, kind of on the coasts and in urban centers like Chicago or St. Louis, that tends to be more blue and Democratic. Regional differences, the Rust Belt is kind of northern Indiana, all of Ohio, southern Michigan, western Pennsylvania and New York tended to be that Rust Belt. We've seen a lot of jobs lost there. We've also seen seats in Congress lost in some of these places as a result of people leaving because the jobs are just not there anymore. And where are they going? They're going to the South and the Southwest. So we're seeing gains in Texas, in Florida, in places like Arizona and Louisiana. And the reason being because people are moving to where the jobs are. And Georgia, for instance, and a lot of those places are in the green or dark green that you see here. And again, a lot of those places, again, south, and in the south, more Republican, more conservative, and tend to favor business, so less regulation, which also encourages business to come there. And people who go to work for those places have jobs and support those values, those cleavages in public opinion. So we see this kind of reinforcing a lot of those characteristics we've talked about. And we've seen changes to reapportionment as a result. Remember reapportionment, the idea that we take the total population, divide it by 435, the number of seats in the House, and we apportion it appropriately. We've seen, again, where are we losing seats? Rust Belt. Where are we gaining seats? In the South. And no surprises there. And we saw that even in the previous decennial census change. Again, Rust Belt losing seats, South and Southwest gaining those seats. Some regional differences. I think I kind of talked about these already, but remember, in rural California, I think Northern California versus Southern California, very different. Think of places like New York City versus New York, upstate New York, that can be much more rural or suburban. And the differences that are there. We have members of the congressional delegation from New York that are Republicans. We have members of the Texas congressional delegation that are Democrats. And so It does not mean that it is all, the state encompasses everybody in one party and is represented by one party alone. There's still a lot of that split, and we're seeing with the changes in government that could be changing with the redrawing of districts mid decennial. But the idea is that people still have to fight for those votes. They still have to win those votes and find out what matters to them and try and cater to that in their campaigns. So we're seeing reds get redder, blues get bluer. No surprises there. But they're still having to go out and campaign for those votes all across the board. All right, so let's talk about some demographics as we get back into this chapter. And again, we're generalizing, but we're doing that for the purpose of political science in order to be able to make some better determinations. Notice here the strongest voting pattern of any demographic group, African Americans. 90% of the time they vote Democratic, and you can't say that with white voters. But white voters do turn out to vote where African Americans, blacks do not. And so education also has an impact, right? Significant difference in socioeconomic status. Those with a higher education tend to vote more in the African American community. Those without tend to not. And then obviously with President Obama being the first black American elected president, 95% of the African American vote went to Barack Obama, and pretty significant in that exercising of internal efficacy there. The Latinx community, less monolithic, as we know, because there are many different striations of ethnicity here. We've got Mexico, Cuba, Latin America, a lot of different aspects, again, not monolithic in any means. Cubans tend to support Republicans, more conservative, where those outside of the Cuban community tend to be more democratic. And a lot of that stemming from Castro and the Castro regime in Cuba for so long. Obama got 2/3 of the the Latinx vote, and many times they're called the sleeping giant because President Trump won them in 2024 when Biden won them in 2020. So they are the sleeping giant because, again, the pendulum moves and they move with it. And a lot of those independent voters or those that may be voting based on the candidate and their characteristics voted for Trump, then voted for Biden, then voted for Trump. And so there is some back and forth there. Asian Americans, also not monolithic. We have Japanese Americans that are more democratic. Some Asian Americans from other backgrounds, again, voting based on that, but the tend to be depending on their national origin, tend to be different in that respect. But they are higher educated in a lot of cases, higher incomes, and associating higher political activity with that. More political participation based on this is what Magleby is telling us in a lot of those cases. Religion, we see that the Jewish community and the Catholics tend to vote more Democratic. Again, depending on circumstances, and again, we're generalizing. Protestants tend to vote more Republican. Evangelicals in the Christian community, fundamentalists, tend to be more conservative as well. The Catholic candidates, Al Smith, JFK, Joe Biden, and Al Smith not winning that one, but JFK and Joe Biden did. And notice, Jewish people tend to vote 90% of the time, with no affiliation 60% of the time. And so that tells you that they more correlate with their religion than with a party. And that's important to someone who's running, trying to appeal to that middle of the road or that undecided or that independent voter because they care about the issues that you're talking about. And so that's why it's even more important, that cross-cutting cleavage of public opinion, it's even more important that they're focused on those issues, that they're focused on telling you about the issues they care about, because that is going to be the driver of whether you come out to vote. Okay, gender. Men tend to vote Republican, conservative. Women tend to vote more liberal or more Democratic. And that gender gap continues. There's been an ebb and flow, kind of up and down over time, but they do tend to continue to support that, that men tend to vote more conservatively and women more liberally. Men more Republican, women more Democratic. The LGBTQ community tends to vote more liberally. Obviously, this is an issue that is supported by liberals, not as supported by conservatives. And so Democrats tend to get their vote along these lines. And we see some data from Gallup and Pew here that kind of underscore that point. So there's a lot of demographic factors. Obviously, the family has changed drastically in the last 50, 75 years. Education, the importance of education and how people have access to higher education has also impacted political participation. We've seen income, again, driven by education and family in a lot of cases, and that wealth has also driven that political participation. But we are not typically a social class, and we've seen that kind of struck down over time by the courts. Think the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, all of those really striking down class conscience country aspects based on race. And we've seen that continue time and again to be struck down. And age is an important one here because we have to talk about it. The whole idea that people who are older tend to vote more religiously because, well, in some cases they're more religious, but also because they're more reliant on those government programs, and they care about what who's in office to support the issues and the government programs that they rely on to live. Think Social Security, think Medicare, think Medicare Part D, the drug benefit that senior citizens get. That's all contingent on who they vote for. And so they're very active voters. They also have a lot more time to be able to do that and to get educated and be an informed voter in that respect. So family structure, again, those who are married tend to vote more conservatively. Those not married tend to vote more liberally. And this is just from the 2020 election, so keep that in mind. But I think you would find that they probably are pretty similar in 2024 along those lines. Parents with children tend to vote more conservatively. Men with children and women with children, again, the gender gap, tend to vote more liberally. In that respect. Education, as I mentioned, higher educated individuals tend to vote, and again, we're generalizing, but the idea is tend to vote more liberally, and then those with less education tend to vote more conservatively, and the demographics would play that out. There are always exceptions to that rule, obviously, but again, generalizing for the most part. And here's more data on that education in those terms. We kind of talked about this with the social class and the different types of workers, but those making more money tend to vote more conservatively. And again, there are other factors that may influence that vote, but the idea is that those making less money would tend to vote more liberally. For the government programs, those economic benefits, think welfare checks, unemployment insurance, the food stamps, women, infant, children cards, that kind of thing, that would support that as well. Okay. Party identification, and we can see the top 1% voting more conservatively, as I mentioned, and the bottom tending to vote more liberally in that respect. What is going to unite us? Going back to what we talked about in Chapter 4, we've talked a lot about the demographics, and you may remember we talked about the Democratic Party coalition, and you, again, can pause this because I talked all about this in Chapter 4, and kind of the demographics that make up that Democratic Party tent, as well as the issues in their platform that they support. I did the same thing with Republicans under the Republican Party tent and what issues they supported in the election. But what unites us, what brings us all together going back to where we started in chapter 4, the political culture is all about this idea of democratic values. We support and are committed to democracy. Who doesn't love democracy, right? We live in a democratic a democratic union. We support democracy. We support economic opportunity. We value that liberty, the work ethic. We value hard work and freedom to work. The American dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and property. To be able to get educated and to be more socially mobile and income mobile because of that education. All of those things are what unite us. How we legislate those things becomes much more important to how we express our ideological beliefs. And that's where the internal efficacy comes in. That's where we go back to where we started, which was the idea of what is going to help us to be a more educated and informed citizen, what is going to exercise that internal efficacy and get us off the couch and into the voting booth. It's going to be to support these types of issues, to support the issues that we care about, to make our voices heard, and make sure that people hear us in terms of what we care about. So that is what it's all about. Now, there is a section in here in the slides on supplemental data. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I think it is important for you to take a look at it if you're interested in terms of all of the different demographic data, but it does pretty much support everything we've talked about here in this video. I hope you found this helpful. There is also, at the end of the slides, a self-assessment that you can answer some questions and kind of see the answers, and you can do that in the slides if you want to, if you're interested. There's about 10 questions in there, just to kind of pick your brain and kind of check out the questions and answers and kind of quiz yourself. That's always a fun thing to do too. All right, I hope you found this helpful as we wrap up demographics and looking at the importance of exercising internal efficacy in our American republic and in the American political landscape. Have a great time. I'll see you in Chapter 8, Polls Week, coming up next. Live that 5.